You know, to come in here and talk about Spider-Man and Superman, I could talk about all the great stories, the creators, everybody that, came together to put this book together. But instead, after reading this book, something very interesting hit me. Characters from Marvel and DC are generally shown to be different, okay? Gotham is supposed to be dark and brooding. Metropolis is supposed to be the other side of the coin of New York City. But a lot of times you get DC characters, excuse me guys, you get DC characters that are shown as different than their Marvel counterparts. What I really enjoyed about this book, which is written by Brad Meltzer, Dan Slott, Joe Kelly, and so many others, and drawn by Pepe Larraz. Who else did some of the artwork in here? We had Marcos Martin doing a story. We had, what else do we have here? Dan Slott and Marcos Martin. We had Joe Kelly with Humberto Ramos. We had Jeff Johns with Gary Frank. We had Louise Simonson with Todd Nauck. There's Stephanie Phillips with Phil Noto, Brian Michael Bendis with Sarah Pacelli, Jason Aaron and Russell Dodderman, and Jeff Loeb and Jim Chung. And the thing about it is, not only is the artwork amazing, the stories are amazing, but what I want to point out more than anything in this review is the simple fact that these characters act like they can interact with each other normally, okay? Lana Lang and Gwen Stacy having conversations about their fellas. It's not that they're that far apart, okay? Lana Lang is a country girl and Gwen Stacy is a city girl, but it's natural. I don't know how else to describe it other than that, because a lot of times when you get a meeting of Superman and Spider-Man, Superman didn't know who Spider-Man was at first. And Spider-Man, was told and kind of controlled that Superman was bad. And a lot of times when you get these meetups, it's almost like they are destined to throw punches at each other for a little while before they understand that they're on the same side. But here you get a story where Superman and Spidey are trapped. And it's one of those stories where Spidey has to carry all the weight, more weight than he can handle. Superman even says, I looked at your bone density, using x-rays, and through those x-rays, you can't support this weight by yourself. So eventually Superman eventually ends up getting back to his feet and helps Spidey carry the weight. But this is not the crux of the story. The crux of the story is that once Spider-Man and Superman team up against Luthor and the Green Goblin, then they go home, okay? And Peter returns to New York City, Clark returns to Metropolis, and in the end, you get to see just how similar they are. Let's see, and you get to see Clark's parents meet Peter and Aunt May, and you get to see how down to earth these characters are. And then you get a Spider-Man noir story by Dan Slott and Marcos Martin that was, pretty short, but you get to see almost like a golden age version of Superman and Spider-Man noir fighting it out. Then you get to see the two girls talking about their fellas, followed by some awesome Gary Frank art with Jeff Johns writing. But like I said, it's not always about the art, it's not always about the writing, it's the synergy that is brought with this book. And I can't describe well enough how much I loved that synergy. It felt like they were in a shared universe, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Rather than being DC and Marvel, two different coins, they felt like they could interact with each other on a daily basis. And Stan Lee always said that Marvel was the world outside your window. And I've always found it harder to relate to some DC characters. Oddly enough, one of the ones that I can relate to and really love is the Spectre. And he's above everybody, except for God. But he's above everybody. He's an agent of God. But I've always had a hard time relating to Superman because of all of his powers. But at the end of the day, I guess I've forgotten as a writer that he's also just a kid from Smallville who has a ma and a pa and a farm. And that's the life that he lived before he got all of these magical powers and used them to their fullest. So if you ever get the opportunity, like I hopefully will one day, to write comic characters for the big two, always remember their humanity, because that is what is important about this book, okay? It's just like I talked about the Century, issue number 2 a couple of days ago. Paul Jenkins wrote on his Substack about a friend of his who used to run a comic shop that just passed away. And it wasn't his love for the other man and his camaraderie and his brotherhood with that other fella that you came to understand how close two people can understand each other and be friends for years, and then to spend just 10 minutes with that person. Here you got to spend 10 minutes with each one of these characters, each one of these sets of characters. And you got so much more out of that 10 minutes than you would have had you gotten a 200-page comic with 10 pages or 20 pages, let's say 20 pages of each one of these stories. Sometimes when you distill things into their smaller form, you distill it into 5-6 pages rather than to 6 issues, rather than to a 12-issue maxi series. That's when you find the heart of the characters, and that's when you hear the voice ring truest, is in those short stories. So if you have a love for comic books, not Marvel, not DC, any kind of comic books, and you like character-driven stories where those characters have consequences and they age and they present themselves as real, pick this book up. It'll absolutely blow your mind. And while you're in the shop, ask them if they've got the Century issue number 1 and number 2. Because you can't go wrong with this one. And so far, you cannot go wrong with Paul Jenkins' The Century. You have to find that humanity in everything that you do. Not only do you have to love the job that you do each and every day and the people that you come home to, but the people that you come home to are the real reason behind your story. The real reason Ramakrishna, God, whoever your higher power is. The story at home is why you're here. The story at work is not necessarily why you're here. Now, if you're a second responder like I am, and you work in the healthcare field, maybe that is part of your story. But the fact of coming home and spending time with your wife and having dinner with your wife and your son and getting excited about him graduating high school very, very soon, that's the story. That's the story that's presented in here. That is where the heart and the soul of this thing comes into. You can read about Swamp Thing if you want to, and you can read about a muck-encrusted monster that is everybody's afraid of, or you can read the humanity and the story of Alec Holland. You can choose to read a story of the absolute Joker, and you can just see evil and broken intentions and billionaire playboy status turned completely on its head. Or you can see somebody who was raised with a penchant for violence. And that doesn't make it right. But it's what he knows. And it's what he seeks to inflict upon humanity. So think about it, guys. Think about not only work, but think about when you get home. And when you think about home, think about this book and think about these characters. Thank you guys for watching these videos, giving me the opportunity to talk about these books that I love so, so much. You guys you'll never understand how important this is to me and how important this community has become over the past 2 years. So thank you for that. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. I want you to come back for each and every video. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.